1763, Dominica is handed over by the Treaty of Paris to the British. This is, unlike Barbados, unlike Antigua, unlike St. Kitts, this is a state-organized colonization. It comes directly from the Board of Trade, okay? And everything is managed from London by a governor. So this is a completely new setup that's happening here. So the town of Portsmouth, that's going to be the capital of Dominica, is then laid out military fashion. Central Square, and government house, public, the courthouse, the assembly, public buildings, the governor is going to be living on the banks of the Indian River, and you can just imagine him taken up in a wonderful skiff, they call it, to his place. You have the market, and at the mouth, and the bleaching place for the sails, and the North River is on the other side. They even have the jail set up there, F, beyond the jail. So this is Portsmouth. You can see the long street in the colored photograph of Bay Street running right the way down across. So as it is, it only got to the 3rd Street. All of this was supposed to be Zikak. Some of it is Zikak and stuff. And the wonderful thing, you know, there's the historian in me just loves the streets of Portsmouth. But I know that somebody someday is going to come and say, oh, that's all colonial. But when you have all of the members of the Board of Trade, you know, you have Sandwich, which is not something you eat, that's Lord Sandwich. Pembroke, Lord Pembroke, and Bedford, the Duke of Bedford, all of them are there, yeah? Halifax, and Granby. Granby was the one that was instrumental in capturing a lot of these islands, so you'll find Granby Street in St. Vincent, you'll find it in St. George's, Grenada, whatever. Portsmouth maintains all of these streets. However, the cat out of the bag, they want going to change them to whatever, Boulevard and Avenue and whoever. So, Portsmouth architecture essentially is once again the Tikais, but they're interspersed with these merchant, and also, remember, this is a seaport. So there are people associated with schooners, with captains. Down here you have the Peters, which still exists, still maintained, and Harrison Peters, his family, they were agents for the ships. And so here and there, spotted around, you get a larger, more substantial houses. Of course, most of these scenes have now been changed. Portsmouth today is full of the concrete and upper level troughs and all that kind of stuff. So it has changed quite a bit, but it does give you, particularly this one at Bay Street, a view before the motor car, because everybody is walking up and down the trail here. That's before the motor car. And then the State House. That is the original government house, because the government house, actually, the original one, was in the center where the State House is now. When Sir William Young and these people lived, it was a central house with a veranda all around it, and 2-level wooden house, big roof. It demolished in the hurricane in 1834, and this guy, he had a house across the wall. He was a Blunt, and he was the accountant general, but there was a bit of bobble, you know, corruption is endemic. So way back then, Mr. Blanc had to give up his house because he was owing government money. And so they took it in 1840 and turned it into government house. You see it 1 story there, and then they had the bedroom in the 1920s. And then, of course, the Chinese take over and they've turned it into this reception area, but essentially they've kept the main outline. And the one important thing I beg them to keep is the front step. It's changed slightly, but the front step, every photograph, you know, from 1901, with the accession, the death of Queen Victoria, you can just take multiple pictures of these people on the steps, and it's all the House of Assembly, the early Houses of Assembly, the members of the Roseau City Council, and all that kind of thing, all on these steps. And it's amazing. I should have put one here, but that was not in my remit. But it's an amazing place. I didn't want the steps to go on. They put the steps back, they put them a little different, but I was pleased to see they had an OECS meeting here a couple of years ago, and they put all the OECS leaders on the steps. So the step continues to be the place of photographs. Brunias again gives us a nice little insight. God knows what a deer is doing in the house at Government House. But Sir William Young was a kind of crazy guy. He brought peacocks and his own musicians and his own artists and all that. And what I'm interested in more than the people and the deer is the frame. So here is the governor's house, done with the same framework and wood that is done. Over there, another part of the house with the wooden floor, and those of us who lived with wooden floors can remember all the scrubbing and everything that would go on once a year before Christmas or whatever. And so these enslaved attendants are here cleaning the floor. But you look out and there's the veranda and the overhang. But what is extremely interesting for me is these black and white squares are marble tiles. And when this house was demolished by the hurricane in 1934, and they were adapting Mr. Bland's house to become the government house, they took the marble slabs and they put what remained at the top of the stairs. In 1811, what happened in 1805, the French were bombarding Roseau. They burnt most of Roseau, and they demolished the old House of Assembly. But it's done on exactly the same pattern, right? And we have all the arrangements for a Mr. Shillingford as ancestor of one branch of those Shillingfords that went to live at and worked in Newtown. He was a blacksmith, ran a blacksmith company, and those very strong cast iron grating and the gate were produced by him. We have all the records of that. So there's the House of Assembly. It suffered fire in 1979. It was rebuilt, and it continues to be used. We have some older pictures, 1924, and this one down here was even older still. So that House of Assembly has stood there, all the laws, all the slaves, and it was also the place of trial. So within those walls, you can just imagine what was said and what was happening. All these people, like the trial and the women who were found in Ballas camp and everything, all of that happened in that house there. So it's remarkable. Another Georgian, classic Georgian building. You will go to other places like Barbados, Antigua, St. Vincent. Their House of Assembly follows that pattern very closely. And then Independence Street, here we have a building that shaped really trying to do everything possible to save. And that is the Dominica Trade Union Hall. Because here it is, this photograph is 1872. And there is the Trade Union Hall as it is almost today. And what is so fantastic about that, from the term of Rabbi Alvin, to you, from the point of view of the political history of Dominica, is that step. You know the things that have been said and the decisions that have been taken, the founding of the Dominica Labour Party on the 24th of May 1955, the Dominica Freedom Party, the UWP, all of them, you know, from that step. And what is so wonderful about that step, it is just the right height for political meeting. You're just above the head of the crowd. You're not way, way, way up above and around. The crowd it's almost like an Elizabethan Shakespeare theatre, because they're kind of half around you, you know, and it really gives you the pep to speak. It's a remarkable thing. Well, I know because I was there and I spoke. And it was really, you know, it gives you a feeling. Yes. So, That's and then beyond it is the Piper building, which actually is extremely old, and it appears in some of Brunias's paintings when he on the riverbank and he's going back. It's almost like a plantation house in the center of Roseau with this fantastic step and all. So that's important, and it's also important because that is where, with their 25 students, the Dominica Grammar School began, in a rented house in there. And then Dorbini, who I pointed out to you earlier, he left in his will money for the Dominica Grammar School to purchase a permanent site, which is where All Saints University and so is now.